Hi, my name is Lina Sherman. I would like to welcome you all to this talk show at World Water Week that is about innovating governance for improved water security. Nations stand at a crucial juncture, facing the pressing task of crafting an effective governance and policies to tackle the mounting pressure on water resources. There is an urgent need for innovative approaches to water governance within a diverse community of stakeholders, politicians, investors, farmers associations, and the private sector. And that is what this talk show is about. I'd like to introduce to you the speakers, Karin Gardes, Acting Executive Director and COO here at SIWI. Karin joined SIWI in 2020 after more than 20 years in international development corporations, where she has held various positions at the UN, the EU, International IDEA, and Save the Children. And Henk Ovink is the Special Envoy for International Water Affairs at the Government of the Netherlands. Henk was also instrumental in the Netherlands' role as one of the co-chairs to the United Nations Water Conference this year. So welcome. Karin, I'll start with you. Why is it important to promote water governance innovations now?
Well, I think it's increasingly clear throughout the world that water is, of course, vital for societies and ecosystems to prosper, but we also know that water is increasingly under pressure. So we need to find solutions urgently to tackle that water crisis. Water pressure is increasing because of climate change, because of demographics, and economic development that is really changing both the water supply and the water demand. And we know for a fact that supply of water will get more uncertain due to climate change, among other things, but that demand for water is increasing in all sectors, be it food, energy, agriculture, etc. And we also know that water cuts across borders, sectors, stakeholders, and we need more solutions that can bring these different stakeholders to the table to join forces and identify those solutions going forward. We also know that water cuts across all sustainable development goals. And if we are to deliver as an international community to the commitments and the promises that we've made with Agenda 2030, we need to now make the leapfrogging that is needed in identifying those solutions. And when you think of innovation, you often think of technological solutions, IT, digitalization, artificial intelligence. But innovation can also be in how you design policies, who you bring to the table when you discuss policies, strategies, water management issues, etc. And that innovation is not necessarily something that we have to wait for a brilliant invention to leapfrog on, that we can implement already today.
Hank, do you have any take on that?
Except for totally agreeing with Karin and echoing what she says, the challenge with water is that it's connected to everything. Makes it complex on one, but on the other it means that everybody and everything, every institution, every sector has a need and an interest. And because of, Karin already said, freshwater availability is going down. We actually are putting a big dent into this water cycle, predominantly because of our own actions. So we take more water from our aquifers, half of them beyond the tipping points. Our glaciers are melting and our poles are melting. So that means that water becomes more saline and more polluted. So the fresh water available for our economies, our societies and our sectors is less, while the competition over water therefore will increase. Meaning that everyone and everything has an interest and a stake, means that collaboration is going to be key. And governance and collaboration are not the same thing. Governance is the way how we organize ourselves. Collaboration is the way how we achieve things. So totally different objectives. And we need to, in the context of this crisis that is indeed exacerbated by climate, overcome our lock-in We all know the climate debate, a very much contested space. And water, and I think therefore the connection with innovation is amazing, water is a solution space. So the combination between that it's connected to everything and everyone, that everyone has a need, an interest, but also something to gain, that partnerships are therefore key in doing this cross-cutting, and that solutions emerge from those partnerships. It actually presents the opportunity for alternatives. So it's key. One other part to that is the way we organize ourselves in the current context and with vested interests and past policies and practices is heading for disaster, where we're heading for disaster every second already. And we see that in the news. The IPCC, in their climate change and land report from 2019, more or less said that 99% of all global investments increase climate change. And second, the way how these investments pan out, how they land on the ground in our geographies, cultures, and economies, is making us more vulnerable. So what we're doing is not to be replicated, although we do it every day. We have to identify alternatives. Alternatives don't come from the existing system. Many smart people before me said so. You can't invent the future with the knowledge, the experience, but also not with the institutions that actually invented today. So we have to do a parallel approach where next to changing institutions, which takes forever, we have to bring those innovations and interventions on the ground. And for that, you also need alternatives in collaboration. And from theory, we call this to create a safe space. And you can understand what it already means. A space where people in their institutions come together without immediately fighting each other because of all these interests that are competing, but where it's their opportunity to come together to say, oh, if I bring this and you bring that, then what are the opportunities to really develop solutions that matter? And these innovation spaces, these types of collaborations that are, of course, radically inclusive, that are bottom-up, are key. Last, and that is because this water cycle is so much affected by humankind, is that where water was also always very local or regional in the context of our systems, our riverine systems, our river basins, our coastal systems, or our aquifer systems, you can say, okay, we organize on these geographical scales, also cultural scales, indigenous, because of the way we plan and we develop our economies and deforestation and the destruction of nature and our wetlands. On top of that, climate change. We now have atmospheric rivers, green water evaporation that is impacting beyond continent each other. So next to this very local, regional systems way of working together across man-made borders, we also have to work globally together in a different way. And here comes the UN into play. Think about innovations. Well, this is one of the larger challenges we face.
What is SIWI's role in promote water governance?
SIWI is a think and a do tank. So what we try to do is to, by offering technical assistance, by collecting voices and experiences from different stakeholders in the field, on the ground, those water decision makers, we are learning from that, meaning that we always fine-tune our offer. And this capturing of the experience and the knowledge on the ground allows us also to think and to hopefully be also proposing new ideas, new research, and new approaches to water governance. So by doing, we gain the credibility to think, and the thinking gives us the legitimacy to do. And I think it is that cycle that SIWI can really offer when it comes to our mission and our proposal. But one of our fundamental approaches is really to provide the safe spaces that Henk was referring to bring together and convene the stakeholders in very much this diverse and inclusive way to create this sense of belonging to the same community with the same mission and mandate, which is to solve the water crisis. And I think Henk said it brilliantly. there is a water crisis. It's not a thing of the future. Climate change is not something, oh, in 20 years, maybe we need to do something before that. No, we need to act now. And I think we have heard for too long, we need to act now. There is a sense of urgency. So let's do it. And SIWI, as a small player in the scale of things, but is absolutely ready with our mission to offer the platforms, offer the safe space, bring all stakeholders around the table, do pilots and testing in order to identify the good practices that are out there when it comes to the governance of the water sector.
Yeah, but as you say, it seems like the hardest thing to change us all to do something new here.
Can I add a bit to what
Yes,
Karen said?
yes,
Because
please.
I think you're right in the thinking and doing and providing a safe space. Don't underestimate your role in being like the backbone and the agency, providing agency for more vulnerable voices, for a conversation that is more contested or where conflicting interests come together. So the safe space itself, you are also part of organizing and orchestrating. And I think you do this not only based on your experience and talent in organizing, you do it in the combination of being really a substance matter expert. So I think it's what we need in the world, and we see it lacking more and more within governments, but also with private sector partners. Our balance sheets determine what we do. So if there's progress, we're okay. All these smileys, you have a smiley and a green, a yellow, and a red. So if everything's green and yellow, you're okay. Doesn't really matter what you achieve. But that's the opposite. We have to combine the process, the way to provide agency with real knowledge. And I think this is what SIWI also does in the context of then creating that safe space, but not as a neutral broker, but as a broker that really provides agency for the more vulnerable voices that we have. And partners like SIWI in the challenging world that we are critical important in moving this agenda and these actions forward.
No, thank you, Henk, for saying that. And I think that really boils down to also SIWI's approach of putting people and water at the center of everything that we do. And I think that's it. That's exactly it. That's right.
Henk, you were working at the UN, the last UN Water Conference. What would you say were the main impacts of that conference on promoting water governance?
That's an easy question.
Yeah. A short answer, please.
And I'm also very bad in short answers. I always want to tell everything, and then before you know it, So I think a couple of things are important. You have to understand that after 46 years, for the first time, at the UN, not there, we have a World Water Week every year, but at the UN, in the context of a UN system and a responsibility of the United Nations, we had a conference, 97.7 in Mar del Plata, which drove, of course, the WASH agenda, but also integrated water resource management, without a real follow-up from the UN system, but massive follow-up, of course, in the world. Don't underestimate that. The UN conference in March of this year also did not get the mandate from the member states, from the General Assembly, to broker a deal. This was not a conference to broker a deal, it was a conference to come together and bring voluntary commitments. And when we were prepping the Kingdom of the Netherlands and the Republic of Tajikistan as the co-host of the conference, with the support of UNDESA and UN Water and as the secretariat, we said it's not enough to only have this post-modernistic flower garden of commitments. They bloom for a year or sometimes the next year and then, whatever it looks. We need structure, at least, even if they're voluntary and we can't broker a deal, we can broker a structure. And I said, we need a global pact for water. And everybody said, no, it's too much. No pact, Henk, go. Shut up. So the pact became watered down into this water action agenda, which actually I don't think is a watered down way, but it's just a different way of positioning it. And the action agenda itself is structured along 5 themes and backed up with the accelerators of the Global Acceleration Framework, and brings together these 832 commitments from across the world. And of course, some of them you immediately hear the world say, some of them are weak. Yeah, that's true, of course. Commitments come in many ways and forms. Don't underestimate weak commitments because they can be the beginning of something very strong. And the judgmental part is always, it's not enough. But if you look closely, then even the smallest commitments, there are people behind it. People that worked very hard in their community, with their NGOs, with perhaps a private sector and a financier, and say, we're going to do this in this river basin. And then the global community immediately says, no, it's not enough. Well, it might be the beginning of something amazing. The action agenda is a structure that not only brings them together and gives them structure, there's also an assessment. Which of them work, which of them don't? Which can we replicate and scale? Which should we reinvent? What are the coalitions that are strong but need more strength? Agency or backbone by SIWI or others? And which of those coalitions can actually be leaders and help transform the world? So we agreed with the UN that every year at the high-level political forum we will take stock and assess where they stand, but also provide support. And again, use a World Water Week as a way to bring them together and say, okay, if we need them in the context of water security, this is what will be beneficial. We'll bring the commitments to the COP in the Emirates and say, okay, half of the commitments are about water and climate. Which of those half can we already present as leading commitments, which need support, an agency, etc., etc. So I think that is one key outcome. The other is we got over 10,000 people in New York, mayors, indigenous, women, youth, private sector financiers, of course, presidents, kings, and ministers from across the world, to show the commitment to take action. It's something different than a negotiation, but at least the willingness that the world owns this agenda across sectors, not only water, but agriculture, food, energy, and so forth. Perhaps last, because there's of course more and all the law, I won't do that, but the call of the world to the UN itself was very clear, crystal clear. Because until this day, there's no one you can call on water at the UN. You can call UN water, nobody picks up the phone. You can try, it doesn't work. And a year ago, 149 countries signed a letter to Secretary General Guterres, and that came out of the preparatory process of the UN Water Conference. The Bonn meeting, hosted by the government of Germany, one of the recommendations of that Bonn meeting was you have to appoint an envoy, not an envoy in the sense of a person and then nothing, but ensure that there's an environment in which such an envoy with that leadership can work. It was again amplified at the conference, and we came up with an advice and say you need to build a policy home somewhere in the UN where there's real ownership, expert ownership. You need that envoy for leadership, and you need coordination that is stronger with a better mandate than UN Water currently has. So it's a triangle approach. And I said it this morning in the high-level dialogue and immediately got, banged on the head by the UN supporters by saying, hey, Henk, you can't say that. But until this day, on that level, of course, in the synthesis report, something was written, but on that level, there's no action. And I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but I'm just saying that the momentum of the conference was in March. I don't care if they do it in a temporary way, set up a task force, do an interim base. I understand appointing an envoy is very political. I understand that moving this structurally is also very political. But we as donor countries said there is money, there is no excuse to move fast on this. The SDG summit is around the corner, and we missed the opportunity to have a strong water agenda in September. So our first moment for change is already past. We're heading for the COP, our next moment. Luckily, we work closely with the Emirates and Tajikistan to firm up that agenda, but we need the backing of the UN system with this support. And I'm not saying this is the holy grail. I'm just saying it's one of the many pieces that needs to be filled.
Thank you. We are nearing the end here, but Karin, do you have one insight that you would like people to take away from this discussion?
Well, I think Henk put it very well. There are dimensions of governance at all levels, And I think the UN is one component of the governance landscape when we talk about water and water governance. Civil society is another such dimension. But also governments are part of this. Private sector is part of this. And the different private sectors are part of this, be it agriculture, be it energy, be it food production, etc. And I think that what we need to move away from is to wait for maybe a UN solution to be put in motion, be it politicized or not. We cannot wait anymore. So we need to do things at all levels, at the level of governments, at the level of the UN, and I agree with your frustration. I hear that, Henk, and I share it as well. But also at the level of civil society, we need to come together and actually stop out-competing each other's. We are there for a bigger purpose, and we need to join forces rather than to try to elbow each other out in that landscape in order to achieve the sustainable development goals. And again, water is literally running through all of the sustainable development goals. So if we are set to do what we have said to do, which is Agenda 2030, we need to act now, and we need to act at all levels. And again, SIWI, with World Water Week and our partners, are trying to bring those conversations to really generate action. So we're more than happy, of course, to be part of those commitments in the Water Action Agenda. But I think there needs to be, at some stage, both an accountability mechanism where there are checks and balances on the process, but also where there needs to be, I would say, an ownership of the accountability. I need to feel accountable for the commitments that I made in the Water Action Agenda. The Netherlands needs to be accountable for the commitments that were made in the Action Agenda, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that that's the kind of peer pressure that we also need in order to make progress.
And there's magic in this.
Yeah. So
if
sorry
we,
to say
no,
that.
but I have to. There's magic in this. Just doing this. In the context of the challenges we face, this lock-in. But if we organize ourselves accordingly, I set up a program in Asia. It's now rippling across the world. It's called Water as Leverage. Really using water as a lever for change, where it's really about bringing the community, the governments, the private sector, institutionals like the IFIs and the UN, and focusing on the solutions and the partnership. And the moment you do it, you present the alternative. And for the UN, just as a reference, there should not be an office somewhere where you knock on a door and there's an envoy behind the desk. No, it should be a village square where we literally bring the world together. So this will be novel. The innovation of the UN will be novel too, otherwise it will fail. It will just become another UN institution.
That's a good ending.
Yeah.
That's a very, very good ending. Thank you so much for coming here and sharing your experience and knowledge and everything. And I will thank the audience online. Stop the broadcasting now.